Coming out of COVID-19, our lives have changed. Our workplaces have changed. Our needs and behaviors have changed. And ultimately, the products that we need will change in the months and years ahead. This video, I'm going to map out for Amazon sellers how to think about product research and product opportunities coming out of the pandemic. Be sure to stay through to the end because I'm dropping a free product idea that I think is going to be worth $30,000 to $40,000 a month by the end of the year that I'm hoping one of you jumps on. Let's go. I've built and led multiple seven-figure Amazon brands. Now, I'm setting out to share how I did it with radically transparent and detailed weekly videos. Join the journey with me and break free. Welcome to Heist. Hey guys, welcome back to Heist. Today we are going to dive into product research. More specifically than that, because we are in a time of unprecedented change, both in the e-commerce environment as well as in our daily lives. This is going to be specifically around coronavirus or COVID-19 oriented product trends that have started to emerge over the last couple months. And not only emerge, but will likely be foundational growth cornerstones of product categories in the coming months and years ahead. So to dive into things, just wanted to start off by kind of hitting on a note that this is, obviously a very US specific thing as most of us sell within the US markets, but it's global facing. This presentation actually originated from a presentation I did to about 65,000 live factories that tuned in to a presentation from Alibaba Network in Guangzhou. And then I've got another one going live this week that's targeting factories in Shenzhen. So there's keen interest on the upstream market with factories in Asia, as well as what this is going to mean for end consumers. So the first presentation I did in Guangzhou, you'll see a lot of the folks there. I know you probably can't read Chinese, but some of those are the GMs of Alibaba, leading factory owners. And then we basically, in the new digital environment that we're in, we basically did a remote presentation. About 65,000 factories tuned in. So not all this portions of this presentation were covered, but a vast majority of them were. And I've got a couple nuggets, obviously, that are distinct for the US market. What we're basically going to look at what is rooting some of the changes that are coming out of COVID just across society in general. I'm going to look at what trends are emerging in the initial wave, as well as how our personal and office lives, specifically in the US, have changed. And stay through to the end, because what I'm going to do, and I'm going to try and obviously, jack a lot of value for everybody here throughout the presentation, but there will be a free product idea that I hope somebody listening actually takes action on, because I think it's going to be a fantastic product opportunity. So with that, let's dive into things. Let's kick it off with a quote, and I really like this quote. I actually don't know who Leon Meganson is, but I like his quote. He says, "It's not the strongest or most intelligent who will survive, but those that can best manage change." I think this is an exclamation point for the world that we live in right now. It's not always going to be the most smart people or companies. It's not going to be the best financially backed individuals or companies. And it's not going to be the most experienced companies or individuals that are going to come out of this and capitalize on the future of e-commerce and the future of product shopping. It's going to be folks that, like us, that are tuning in on this channel and that are taking advantage of opportunities on Amazon as the shape shift happens. And there's really three things that are going on that really existed before COVID, but I think what COVID has done is it's accelerated them and it's increased the impact of each of them. The first is the death of retail shopping. I actually come from a retail kind of product world where you literally need to know the buyer at a particular store. You need to sell through that buyer, and there's a very finite amount of shelf space. They can only have so many pegs or so many products that would actually get merchandised in store at a location. The e-commerce environment over the last 5 years has fundamentally changed this. There's a virtual or a unlimited amount of shelf space that has really been predicated on Amazon.com's operational platform behind the scenes that's made it possible for anybody to get in front of customers. In addition to this, product cycles used to be on the season, and it was, again, heavily driven by retail stores. So you had 1 or 2 times a year to basically shuffle out product and present new products to customers. We're in a world now where I could literally ping my factory and have a new color coming off the line in 30 days, and then it'd be on a boat and in the US within 2 months. So these rapid iterative cycles have dramatically changed both how companies operate and how products are developed, but also the needs of customers are being met on a much faster cycle than they did previously. And what this has really led to also is this digital global change. I kind of look at it like you can virtually manage any part of a business from a laptop now. And I think the supply chain was the last kind of cookie to crumble, and that really has, with the advent of Alibaba and other kind of platforms, has become even laptop oriented around the supply chain as well. I was talking with a founder of a company that came up in the 90s, and he was sourcing products in China, and he literally had to, like, if you can imagine the 90s, getting a flight to China, getting transportation within China, having conversations, identifying factories. It was crazy old school, literally walking down streets and finding what factories did what. We now have a platform at our fingertips that enables us access. So I think these three things existed before COVID, but COVID has literally put an exclamation point on each one of these in kind of driving change. In terms of product trends, I think it's important to avoid fads, that there's kind of an underpinning logic on how we operate. And it's super important as we enter kind of this COVID product opportunity set. To use an example, the obvious angle would be like, hey, let's sell masks, right? Like, people are going to need masks. This new virus has come. And now everybody and their mom is selling masks, and it is a tremendously oversaturated part of the market. There's been new regulations that have been kicked in. And a lot of people got squashed badly by moving in on a short-term first-order effect on product opportunities within COVID-19. What I'm going to be talking about today is really tapping into something that existed or existing demand even before COVID. I think that's important to have a baseline demand that wasn't solely a derivative of the pandemic that's taken place, but that is accelerated by a second-order effect. Or that's been instigated by COVID, and then that will ultimately lead in the months and years ahead to an exponential spike. So to avoid those fad spikes, you've got to look at not only that first order effect, but what is going to happen after this event happens, and what baseline demand existed before this all took place. So that's going to be a key part of the logic as we dive into some of these opportunities. So SecondOrder Trends, this is data that came out of the first month or two when COVID was taking place in March. I realize this is a bit of an eye chart and it's going to be hard to see, but in that first wave of activity, just some interesting product categories that emerged in the top 100 e-commerce growing categories coming out of the first wave of COVID. Number 2 there, you'll see bread machines. Like, who would have thought? But people at home wanting to avoid grocery stores started literally making their own food. So bread machines saw a 600+% spike in online e-commerce demand. Weight training, number 8, over 3-time growth spike. Again, people not wanting to go to gyms, needing to take care of fitness in their homes. Computer monitors, working from home. Dog food, obviously spending a ton more time with pets. Craft kits and projects. How do you entertain a family full of kids for months on end? You look at crafts and activities. Ping pong came out, like, again, another activity, and office desks, like all these things that are fundamentally changing how people's personal and work from home lives emerge in these top 100 categories. On the flip side, it's important to be aware of what the opportunities are. I think it's also important to be aware of what the landmines might be. These are the 100 fastest declining categories, at least in that first wave coming out of COVID in that March-April timeframe that took place. Event and party supplies down more than 50%. I actually know of a gentleman that's in the wedding space, and you can imagine how disastrous that has been for their business. Birthday parties, funerals, graduations, as we've seen, all these things where it involves people coming together in events is just not happening and won't happen for probably the next year plus in the same way that it has before. So those businesses are taking a hit. Classroom furniture down more than 30%. That's pretty obvious why that would happen. Other things like coolers, right? People, with national parks being slow to open up, people aren't going camping and doing those outdoor activities in the same way that they would have otherwise done. So those are some first wave effects, not necessarily indicative of what's going to happen long term, but it informs us in the short term of what is the immediate behavior change that may not be permanent, but what that has kind of spiked an adjustment for people. Now let's start peeling the onion back and looking at what opportunities are emerging, starting with personal life changes. I alluded to entertainment, but obviously with people staying home more, and movie theaters aren't opening up in the same way, activities, camps, All these things that we would normally participate in, especially as we lead into the summer months, simply are not happening in the same way. So we've seen massive growth in games, home entertainment, education, puzzles, activities, things like that. In terms of personal life, this one's obviously a little bit humorous, but people are home, people are bored, and they're getting it on. I mean, there's a lot of hanky-panky that's been taking place. So if you look at what's going to happen 9 months from now in that October 2020 and into early 2021 phase, there's going to be a lot of babies. This has already started to happen in China. They were on lockdown for the month of January and part of February for about 30 days, and they've started to have a baby boom. I would anticipate something similar. So there's going to be a lot happening in the maternity world. And then obviously 9 months from now, if we fast forward to late Q4 and into 2021, there's going to be a ton of babies. And those babies, from the time that they're born all the way through to 5 years old, there's going to be a whole fleet of products that are going to merge, and demand is going to spike for those in the maternity space. Home fitness workout equipment is obviously a massive one. Even as things start to open up, you've instigated this behavior where people have bought Pelotons, people have bought home workout equipment, they bought resistance bands, they bought pull-up bars. All these things they've had to do because things were shut down. But now that they're even starting to open up, people don't want to go to gyms anymore. It's just not, I don't want to go grab weights and equipment, even if they're spraying it down, that 300 other people today have opened up. And so I think a lot of people have changed behaviors to orienting their fitness around home equipment, and that's not going away. One of the more interesting ones, and I think that was totally predicated based on the pandemic, is this whole idea of cooking, self-reliance, and self-personal care. People have started to cook their own food because they don't want to go to grocery stores, or they were worried about supply shortages. They've done things in terms of haircuts. Like I actually have cut my hair 3 times by myself. I've learned how to cut my hair coming out of COVID by myself. So if you think my hair looks whack, that's why I'm my own hairdresser, hair barber. But I bought clippers and I watched the YouTube videos, and now I'm like, you know what? It doesn't look as good as when my barber did it, but I actually like the convenience of just being able to buzz my hair whenever I want to. A lot of people, females, have started to dye their own hair. Not that they didn't before, but it's increased in numbers. And they're probably like, hey, do I need to go to the salon every 60 days and dye my own hair for $90, or should I just delay that out? There's been a ton of personal care behaviors that have changed in the short term, but will also change long term systemically coming out of COVID. Couple kind of data points to underpin some personal life changes that have taken place. Coming out of Trends, so Hustle, which is an awesome online resource and data research house, trends.co is their kind of research outlet, came up with this, like, look at the search for virtual kids activities, looking to entertain kids at home, and the spike that took place in late March, just unprecedented. Moving along to some product examples, I mentioned DIY haircut up over 700%. People, trying to figure out how to cut their own hair. Bidets, it's a running joke, but toilet paper shortages were real, and which started in Japan as a trend, and in Europe as a pretty popular trend. A lot of North Americans have started getting into splashing water up their keisters to keep things clean. So bidets have seen a massive spike. Dumbbells, again, I alluded to home fitness, up over 500%. So some really cool kind of product-oriented data search that started to come out coming out of COVID. Hobby shifts. I think this is what's super important when we think about second and third order effects. COVID caused people to be really scared to go out and shop and get food. Supply chains got constrained and people were worried about where they're going to have access to food. As a result of that, people out of necessity started growing their own food. So there was a ton of search volume for vegetable gardens, garden starter kits, garden beds for vegetables, vegetable plants, indoor garden kits. You can read down the list, but I alluded to bread machines earlier, people looking to make their own bread. Out of necessity, they created this new habit of growing and perpetuating their own food. And guess what's happened? You had a baseline need of like people that were into gardening before COVID, but there's going to be a ton of people that out of necessity learned how to make their own food, but probably like it now. And they've generated a new hobby. And with that new hobby, for years to come, they're now going to be embedded in the product demand for products oriented around gardening, growing your own food, cooking, etc. And this is a huge fleet of second and third order opportunities that have emerged in terms of growing your own food. So just to kind of cap this off, you have a lot of people wanting to train at home. They're changing how they curate their own food and how they buy food and how they make food. The entertainment needs of folks, just as Even as life gets back to normal, you're not going out to restaurants, you're not going bowling, you're not going to movie theaters in the same way you would have before. All those activities are starting to get consolidated around the home, and there's obviously products that are needed to achieve that entertainment with families. And then I alluded to it before, but the baby boom's happening between November 2020 of this year and into 2021. We're going to have a lot of babies. So that's personal trends. Let's move into office life trends, and this is one that I think is super interesting for me. Obviously, as most white collar workers in North America have been forced to work from home, and many won't be returning to the office until the fall or maybe towards the end of this year, maybe not ever. And that's driven a massive demand for home office oriented activities, software, tools, and technology required to have virtual discussions and meetings. And as we start to get back into normal society, there's going to be a huge demand around sanitization. People are shell-shocked. They're nervous. They don't want the spread to continue. Major corporations, office buildings, small businesses need to rethink how patrons, employees, and visitors of their facilities will interact in these physical spaces. So things around, checking temperatures, sanitization processes, people afraid to touch stuff. There's going to be a whole fleet of new processes and mentalities and behaviors that are going to change as we start to reemerge into normal society. And then obviously health has obviously changed too, both, the impacts of working from home in different environments, as well as not being able to get regular treatments and health checks. All of that stuff's going to emerge in terms of health impacts as well in the months and years ahead. So starting off with the virtual concept, obviously there's been a need for non-essential people to basically figure out a way to operate remotely through virtual work environments. And I think what's interesting, that's not surprising that happened initially. I think what's been really interesting to see is how this is fundamentally going to change corporate life forever in America. Twitter basically came out and took the most extreme stance and basically just said, hey, look, we can continue to work remotely forever. Like, that's it. Like, we may never work at an office again. Dell, obviously still in the technology space, but a little bit more old school out of Austin, basically said, hey, remote working is going to become a permanent fixture for us. Amazon, Lord Bezos himself has even come out and said that employees within the Seattle office won't need to come work until at least October and likely up until the new year. So even Amazon, which is near and dear to our hearts, is obviously changing. Also, in terms of buying power, Google has basically initiated a $1,000 stipend for Google employees to outfit their home offices with equipment and gear that they want. And I think this is going to be a very prominent step as we move to a more virtual work environment that, like signing bonuses, like getting your new laptop at a new job, there's going to be a lot of employers that are going to be like, hey, here's $500 to $1,500 to get a standing desk or get an external monitor or a whole other fleet of gear to kind of outfit the home office. This is crazy to me. So Zoom Communications, obviously one of the more popular virtual work and meeting platforms in the US. In December of 2019, so not but 5 months ago, had 10 million monthly subscribers to their service. If you fast forward to April of 2020, they had 300 million monthly users on the Zoom platform. Just an absolutely absurdly insane amount of growth that's taken place. If you look at their market cap, because they're a publicly traded company, they're now worth $49 billion. Worth more than Southwest, Delta, United, Lufthansa, American Airlines, KLM, all of the major airlines in the United States combined. And just to talk about how predominant this massive shift to a virtual work environment has been in the short term, but will also perpetuate long-term changes as well. So examples that are coming out of this, if you just look at demand, standing desk demand up 78%, external monitors up 67%, relatively obvious. One a little bit less obvious, and again, kind of thinking about these third order effects, upper back pain is up 20%. Obviously people working in a different, maybe less ergonomically beneficial environment of their home offices, causing physical adjustments and kind of changes to healthcare as well. This is one that I think is going to be super interesting to watch. So obviously, as we start to go back to work, major corporations, facilities managers, people that operate properties that people interact with are really rethinking how they outfit these operations to be safer and to align with the procedures coming out of COVID-19. Shoe cover dispensers. I saw one of these things for the first time about 3 or 4 years ago during one of my trips to China. They have them in factories where you basically stamp your foot into this machine and it basically wraps your foot in a plastic wrap. This is seeing a 2,000 plus spike in demand in online searches. This is Amazon specific. Touch-free soap dispensers, contact thermometers, sanitized dispensers, hands-free faucets, digital door locks. Things where are very conscious of germs and sanitation within this B2B office and facilities environment have seen massive spikes in search volume on Amazon. So office trends, obviously it goes without saying that people working from home, there's going to be a spike in home office, both for the short term as well as long-term behavior changes. People are going to be renovating their houses and outfitting their houses with home tech that's oriented around an office space. B2B commercial operations are going to fundamentally change as they rethink how people entering their buildings and facilities will need to change their behaviors. And then obviously travel habits, right? People aren't going to be in trains, in planes, in close proximity from a travel standpoint for a long time to come. So with all this, let's distill this down to a product idea. And this is where the kind of the freebie comes into effect. Foot door opener. So let's kind of walk through and think about what the process would be for something like this and how I kind of arrived at this. And we'll obviously look at some Amazon data as well on this. But first of all, you got second order effects, right? People are now scared, whatless of germs and touching things, and they don't want to spread the virus or encounter the virus because of the real fear that's been created around the pandemic. That's led to a behavior change, right? They're not interacting with external environments in the same way. They're not getting close to other people. When they touch things, they're super nervous about sanitization. So what this leads to is a whole fleet of products. And again, the obvious ones might be masks and gloves and hand sanitizer. That's the first wave. What I like to think about is those second and third layer activities that start to emerge. And that's when we can start to think about, virtual things where you don't need to touch. And so in this case, the foot door opener, people don't want to touch door handles anymore. What is a product idea around that? Well, hey, here's one that touches, the foot of a door to open a door. Then you got to validate baseline demand and see, is this a product that makes sense on Amazon? So let's just kind of dive into this and kind of validate this opportunity and see what it might look like. So foot door opener, let's see what Amazon looks like. So this is why I thought it was an interesting opportunity. You can obviously see here, there's a lot of these silver ones, a lot of kits starting to emerge, but look here, 21 reviews, 8 reviews, 4 reviews, 2 reviews, no reviews, 3.5 star reviews. This is a very, very early stage opportunity where there's a lot of the same kind of silver looking foot door pulls out there. So interesting, right? Like there's clearly you could win on this market. Let's just see what the demand looks like. Run the Helium 10 extension. So what I'm looking for here is there a baseline amount of demand that makes sense to go after this product category? So you don't necessarily want something with like 500,000 a month in demand, but you don't want something that's only selling like $500 a month either. So if you look here, the average revenue is not insane. It's like just shy of 6,000. Average reviews is only 10. But I think what's important here is like, look, $6,000 is not a ton of money, but it's also not too bad. But what do I think is going to happen as businesses start to open up over the next 6 to 12 months? This number is going to absolutely go up. In fact, I would predict, looking at even Google Trends data and other things around like using foot door pulls, the demand's in a spike mode. And in the months ahead, I wouldn't be surprised if this becomes a $30,000 to $50,000 a month product category. But it also has a baseline amount of demand that even if it doesn't spike substantially, you've still got a decent business opportunity. So it's good to take these ideas, look at those second and third order effects, what the behavior changes may be long term, and then validate early demand on Amazon and make sure it's there. And this would definitely pass my sniff test. My next approach in kind of tackling something like this would be just kind of going into Alibaba, looking at foot door opener. And if I look here, I think one thing I like was, you see a lot of these silver ones, these black ones are starting to emerge, but I really like this kind of like murdered out black look. So looking for like an aesthetic shift. And then one that I think is super interesting here that's doing really well with, again, really low kind of review volume is this 10 pack. Again, the people that are buying this are usually buying it for a business, likely need multiple doors. So I'm going to play on the angle of looking for something that's black. I'm going to probably do a kit with the black ones that aren't as common here on this first page. And I might look at something like a self-tapping screw or some kind of an easy installation method that I can tap into to add an additional value prop. But as I would come into Alibaba, basically my approach here is to try to communicate with as many factories as possible so I can validate their pricing, their communication, and how well vetted they are with responses. So I'll just come in here and I'll start favoriting things. If you see here, I'm just hitting the heart button on these ones that are black. And again, I can work out finer details with them on quoting and kind of getting other stuff. But I just want to kind of go down here and hit as many of these as I can just to get some early demand, right? Let's kind of throw that. Tap on a couple of these. Bada bing, bada bang. So I've kind of, I don't know what that was, like 8 or 9 of them. And then basically I'll come into my Alibaba. I'll come into my favorites here. And then versus like the time consuming process of reaching out to 20 factories individually, what I basically do is select all of these ones here that I've just favorited. And then I come in here to contact supplier. And then all these factories I can basically send the exact same message out to. So I can ask about MOQs. I can ask for, what it would cost to do a pack of 10. I could see, could you add self-tapping screws for easy installation? Can you offer me exclusivity for the US market? Any question I care about, I can now hit multiple factories at once. And within 24 hours, I can vet the ones that communicate quickly, evaluate their pricing, evaluate all those things that I care about as a buyer. So that's it, guys. Obviously, the world is changing. Our lives are changing. Our needs are changing. Our behaviors are changing. How we interact with products are going to change. And whether it's our personal life, our office life, thinking through both the first, second, and third order effects that are coming through the COVID-19 pandemic, both in the short term as well as the months and years ahead, is critically important. We've taken a very simple idea, a touchless way to open up a door, validated that it is aligned with what the behavior shifts and data are happening that we're seeing at the macro level. And then obviously validated baseline demand on Amazon and found a quick way to identify 10 or 15 factories on Alibaba. And then I would go after this. Like within 30 days, we could have this thing produced and on a boat or in an airplane, ready to launch and go after on Amazon. And I think if somebody can pull this off that's listening to this, I'd love to see this product go live from one of our listeners. I think it could be a $30,000 to $40,000 a month product by the end of the year. If you end up launching this product, which I hope one of you do, let me know in the comments later how it worked out. But more than anything, obviously, I hope that you understand the thought process around thinking about COVID-19 product opportunities and product research on Amazon. Until the next one, guys, we're dropping at least a video a week. Would love to have you subscribe. It would mean a ton to have you part of our community. Chime in the comments. Let me know your thoughts. Giddy up. Cheers, guys.